Där, titta. Hi, my name is Anna Grasotti, and I would want to welcome all of you to our talk today regarding e-commerce and the returns that has increased throughout the pandemic last year and this year. One thing that has struck me is how unaware I am as a consumer what happens to the returns, because it is so easy to make an assumption that my shirt that I'm returning will go back to the shop that I bought it from to be resold. But that's not what it is. Reality, it actually gets shipped to be repacked somewhere else in another country. So each garment has a lot of mileage to each one. So therefore, I'm asking myself, how can we as consumers become more aware of this to change patterns to our consumption? And to dig into this question, I have invited 5 brilliant people to take part in this talk. And first of all, they all coming in from different perspectives in this matter. So I would like to introduce each one of you. That I would want you to introduce yourselves briefly, and then we can go into having a talk around this. So Sharon, would you mind start by a short introduction of yourself, and then from your perspective of how you've been working with the returns in e-commerce?
Okay, hello. Yes, good morning, everyone. My name is Sharon Cullinane, and I am a professor of sustainable logistics at the Handelshochschule in Gothenburg University. And I've been working on this project about returns for the last 5 years. It's funded by Energimyndigheten. And we've been looking at various aspects of returns from the retailer's perspective, from the consumer's perspective, from the distribution company's perspective. But it was all brought about because we realized that companies didn't really know what to do with their returns. It wasn't part of their main business, so it was quite difficult to know what to do with them. And we realized that customers had absolutely no idea about what happened to their returns. So our first project was all about finding out what did happen to returns. And this now we're going on to look at how consumers feel about returns and how we can actually reduce the environmental footprint of returns. I think that's probably enough for me.
Well, thank you, Sharon. That is so interesting. And the other person that we have with us online is Petter from Norway. Could you come in and say hello and just make a short introduction of yourself?
Absolutely. And thank you, Anna, for having us. And I'm Petter. I'm the CEO and the founder of a company called Sizer. Sizer is a spin-off from a Swedish consulting company called Knowit. And we started Sizer because of what we learned from the research that Sharon and her team has published. And because sizing is the largest reasons for returns, that's why we chose to solve sizing once and for all. And we will launch this fall together with some of the largest global fashion companies. And I just want to add also that I am one of the consumers that Sharon is talking about, and I had the same epiphany as you had, Anna, when I started to dig into the return problem and how big it actually is.
Well, thank you, Petter. That is really uplifting to have someone doing something. But we have other people here with us in the studio that's also working with how we can change our behavior pattern. And I'm thinking of you, Jan.
Yes, I'm Jan Magnusson, and I work as a business developer for Helsingborg stad. And we of course have a business development perspective. We want companies to grow and to create jobs, but of course in a sustainable way. So that's pretty much
quite a challenge.
It is, yes.
Do both.
Yes.
And then from also with the e-commerce perspective, Julia, you introduce yourself.
My name is Julia, and I'm the founder of Retur, and I'm so happy to be here, first of all. And we are creating a return management system that is going to eliminate a lot of the manual steps that goes into handling the returns today. But also, how do we collect data regarding the returns, and what insights do we gather from the return data? So
thank you, Julia.
Thank you.
And then waited with you to come last, Lynn, because you have a little bit different perspective, and instead of just shopping and consuming more, can you tell us a little bit about?
Yes, I'm the founder of Popsop, and Popsop is a fashion community that encourage and enables users to swap clothes with each other instead of, or in addition to, buying new. Because it's at this talk we are discussing returns, which is mainly about trying to sell new produced clothes in a more sustainable way. But one thing that is very interesting is also to look into the usage phase and actually prolonging life of clothes that are already produced.
And you're doing something else, as you told me, with the youth.
With the Fashion Goals Academy.
Yes.
Yeah. Well, last year I held a lot of lectures in high schools, meeting students and talked about sustainable fashion with them. And what became very clear was that Generation Z, which they are, young people born 1995 or later, they are super interested in sustainability and they deeply care. But when it comes to the fashion industry, I felt that they were lacking a source for where they could find information about sustainable fashion. So what Popsop did was that we created a digital lecture series that was tailored for high school students. So it's 12 lectures, and it's a mix of fashion profiles and social media influencers that can, talk to the students and meet them where they are. Because I think, again, it's about awareness for this generation, and it's about explaining why they should change the way that they consume fashion, and then giving them concrete tools on how to do it. So so we have 100 schools signed up now that will do these courses starting this fall. So it's really amazing. I mean, there's a lot of things happening in the industry that have started happening just the past 12 months. So
that's
really
fantastic.
Nice. And it is the force behind Generation Z that is. They are really the force behind this change. So I think that we owe it to them to give them solutions.
Yeah, that is really interesting. Thank you for sharing that. Sharon, what do you think of this?
So maybe we should also do a little bit of background in that to show how big the returns problem is, and that the average rate of return for clothing is about 20%, but it actually can go up to about 80%. So for some types of clothing, like occasion wear, like long dresses or dresses that you may wear to a prom, the average rate of return for that type of clothing is actually 80% or more. So you can start to see how big the problem is then. If the average rate for young people for returns is about 50%, so everything that they buy, they send half of it back again, which, as you can imagine, is an absolutely causes a huge problem, and it's something something that businesses have only really just started to get to grips with, because it's a problem that has been growing. And I think that, as Lynn started to say, I think and you, Anna, also, that the problem is that people don't realise that there's anything behind these returns. That they think that once they put them in the post, or they've taken them to a box of some sort to be collected, that's the end of the process, whereas it's not the end of the process. It's never the end of the process. And although not all returns get sent overseas to be processed, many do, and even those that don't often get sent around the country before they're actually reprocessed, repackaged, sorted. And for everything that's sent back, it's very difficult to deal with. You can't just put it back into the system. You need to look at it. You need to smell it. You need to make sure that nobody has put any snus in the pockets, etc. So it's a very labour-intensive process. And I think one other thing that we should also notice is that there are lots of warehouses now being set up to deal with returns, and this sort of thing also creates environmental problems. So I think one of the major sustainable development goals is goal number 12, which is basically responsible consumption and production. And I think this really falls squarely into the responsible consumption idea. And it's great that all these new companies are coming in to think about different aspects of how we can improve the situation. And it might be reducing the number of returns, it might be improving the efficiency of returns, it might be improving with other ways of reducing the carbon intensity of returns. And I think it's really great that over the last 12 months, there have been a number of ideas that are actually stimulating retailers to think about how they can deal with their returns in a more environmentally sustainable way.
Well, I think this is maybe another, I don't know if this is the right question, but isn't one thing also that the industry needs to find new ways to make money that is not about selling new clothes?
And that leads to Jan.
Tell us, Jan.
Do you have the answer for this?
No, not the answer, but I think you're right, because the business models are actually the thing that makes the whole thing run this way. And it's kind of like water. It pours the easiest way, the cheapest way, and we can clearly see that transportation is too cheap. That's why you can transport things abroad and repack them and transport them back, and there is no transparency. So you can't see that this is happening. If you could get transparency and as a consumer could see that this is happening when I return something, that would create awareness. And if we maybe in a political way make something that makes it less profitable to do it that way, it's really complex.
I
really
think
complex.
it's both about creating awareness and at the same time providing solutions.
Yes.
So
and sorry, but business is quite logical, really, and if you make the rules, they will easily adapt to new rules as long as it's the same for everybody. But it's not the same for everybody if somebody goes in the dark and somebody is in the light. So transparency, forced transparency, I think would be a key.
That's interesting. Julia, you were going to say something.
I was just, this is a question to Sharon. So I meet a lot of retailers and we are discussing, should returns be free or should the end consumer pay for the returns? And I think it's a bit of conflict here, because if you look at, the return process is such an important within the customer journey. So if you have a struggle of returning for a company, you will not buy with that company again. You will go to another retailer. So how should retailers, think regarding the cost? Should it be more difficult to make returns, or how?
That's an interesting question. Sharon, first I would could I ask you to answer for Julie, and then I would like to hear from Petter. Because since you were wanting them to make the order right from start.
First, I think free returns is a really interesting issue, and it's an issue that's been quite widely researched. And the problem is that customers actually expect to have free returns, and if they don't get free returns, then they go to another company. And it has been shown that most customers actually look online to start with to see whether a company does offer free returns, and if it doesn't, then they're likely to go elsewhere. So no company really wants to start charging people, and although there are some retailers that do charge for returns, and it's mostly the smaller, more niche companies. So I think it's very difficult. I mean, we have to just accept that when you buy something online, it's not the same as going into a shop. You can't try it on. You can't get the feel of it. You can't see what the buttons look like. You can't get any real perception of what things are. And the sizing issue is a real issue. One size does not fit all. We have to say that. So it has to be that customers are feeling comfortable with buying online. And if we start charging for returns, it reduces that comfort level. So I think what we have to do is accept that there is an element that we just have to accept that returns are going to be free or cheap, at least, not necessarily free, but cheap, and make the process a bit more easy. But I think maybe Petter can talk about this in a little bit more detail about the sizing issue, because that's in all our surveys that we've done. It's the sizing issue that is the big issue.
Yes, absolutely. And when in the last 2 years, when we have been developing Sizer, we have interviewed now close to 400 end consumers. And they all have in common that they don't know what happens when they return items, and they are all kind of shocked. And they also all have in common that they don't like returns more than the stores do. So returns the return problem is a problem both for us consumers and for the shops. And as Sharon says, that the reason that when we return clothes is that you cannot try them on. That is the problem with shopping online. And when more business is driven to the online stores, then returns are going to increase unless we solve the sizing issue. And as Sharon said, this fits directly into the UN Sustainable Goal 12 or 12.5. And they point out that there are two backdrops here. What can I do as a consumer? And what can I do as a business? And the consumers want to make sustainable choices, but they do not have that option today. And they do want a solution that is the same across all stores, because the problem now is that every store has their own sizing solution. And as long as it's easier for the consumers just to return the items than to find the right size, they're not going to be able to solve this problem. So that's why we have started now this journey together with the largest players around the globe, because that's where it needs to start.
Thank you, Petter. That's really interesting. I would like to hear a little bit more from Jan. And first, I think I want to go back to Julia with what is it that we are doing to prevent the returns from the consumption retailer perspective. The sizing is one part. So what is your perspective on how to prevent
returns? I think, the knowledge is so today there's two common ways of how to make a return. So either you fill in this paper form where the end customer fills in, I would like to return this item, this is the reason, and then you send in this paper with the return back to the retailer.
Yeah.
Or you have to write an email to the retailer requesting a return. So then it's an email conversation back and forth. Okay, why would you like to do this? But none of these options, they don't gather the data. So there's a lot of valuable information that goes lost today. that we can, we can use this information to do more, how do I say this in English? More aware choices of how to plan and work to reduce our returns. Because if you don't have the data, or because you don't have the time, or it's not a priority to take these papers and put it into an Excel spreadsheet, what are you making your decisions on?
Yeah, that's so true. And that leads me to Jan, the perspective of the urban, the transports taking place within the city center of a city. You were sharing with me that the big trucks, that they shouldn't go into the city, and then there should be like a logistic coordination between the companies.
Yes, yes, of course. The how to put this? E-commerce creates a lot of transportation within the city, last mile transportation, and returns do as well.
Yeah.
So of course, but then also we have to consider that if everyone would go to the shopping mall buying their pants instead, that would also generate a lot of traffic. So
yes,
it's a complex situation. But the returns, as we are addressing today, maybe. I don't know. I haven't thought about it. The returns in that perspective that much, actually.
But I think it's what's coming to me is that there's data to be gathered, and then how you can use that data to become a more lean process in the return process. I would want to go back to you, Lynn, but first I would want to go back to you, Petter. You shared something with me that I thought was like mind-blowing regarding the amount of natural resources it takes to produce one pair of jeans.
Yes, and it actually takes, the average is about 7,000 liters of water to produce one pair of jeans. And that is drinking water for 2 families for 2 years.
Okay.
And because of the high return rates, we know that the production is higher than the actual demand. So if we can align the production with the demand, and then because of bringing the return rates down, we could actually save huge amount of resources. Water, electricity, and so forth. And that's another dimension with this return problem. The logistics behind it, of course, it's a problem, but the real problem is that the average is about 25% of all returns end up in landfill. They goes directly to waste. And that waste problem is enormous. And as Sharon also said, that if they are not sent to landfill here in Europe, they are shipped around the globe and then go to landfill in less developed countries that do not have the processes to actually handle the waste in a good manner. So it's a huge problem, actually.
Yes, it's a problem that I'm thinking of that there's an expression that there's no such thing as a free lunch. Is there such a thing as a free return? I don't think that there is. I think we are paying a price. And as you said, 2 families. If I'm making a return, I'm buying 5 garments and I'm returning 3 of them. 3 pair of jeans. That means 2 families, 2 years of drinking water. 2 families. 4 families, 6 families drinking water for 2 years in my return. And if they will be resold, that's one thing. But if they will just not even be used, I think that's horrendous. That's mind-blowing. And then I'm coming back to you, Lynn. You said something earlier today about the how to to be mindful and aware regarding, what was it that you said was so nice?
In the car on the way here? No.
When we were walking here, the best way of...
Yeah, I mean, we can talk about returns, and we can talk about how to, create sustainable fabrics, etc. But without doubt, the absolute best thing you can do for the environment is to prolong the life of clothes that are already produced.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So, and I think also, and I'm so glad and honored to be a part of this, because I think that to really create a change, we need to work together.
Yeah.
And Popsop as a community also has a lot of data, but we have data from the usage phase, and that is of course data that you can use to reduce returns, and also to for the fashion industry to be brave enough, or how do I put it, to offer the consumer more ways to keep their wardrobes updated. That is not just about buying new clothes. If we look at the transport industry, I mean, if I go from place A to place B, I can choose to go with a taxi, I can walk, I can take a bike, I can take the car. But in the fashion industry up until now, it's been only to buy a new item. If I want an updated closet, I need to buy a new item. I was just thinking about Sharon talking about dresses, because I think dresses is a perfect example of an item you buy once, and then you have it once or twice. But it's filled with such a great memory. I mean, you've traveled with it, you've dated in it, and Popsop will actually have a big event during Fashion Week where we invite people to swap dresses with each other. So, yeah, I just think this is a great way to start, and to just have this conversation and seeing how can we collaborate.
I think that is... I think that is key. How can we collaborate? What can we do? We have a few minutes left, and I would like to go around as a circle and just to see what are your thoughts from just having this short, brief talk. And because my intention is that we start talking about this, that we start to have a conversation, and that we start to collaborate. Sharon, what are your thoughts?
Well, I think there's a couple of things that we haven't talked about, and one of the things is the idea of try before you buy, which encourages people to actually buy more than they need and send things back. There's also the issue of companies, finance companies, offering to so that you can delay the payment for a long time, which again encourages returns, and that's two things that do encourage returns a lot. And Jan was talking about the last mile, and in fact in reverse logistics it actually becomes the first mile, which is quite an interesting concept, because and collection boxes and things like that are very much are a way of reducing the actual logistics involved. But I think the idea of actually making people aware is the biggest thing that we can do, because most customers have no idea what happens with returns, and the more we can make them aware of what happens by various different options, different ways, then that's going to be the way forward, I think.
Thank you. And now you said that making the customers aware, and how about the retailers? Are they aware?
I think they're becoming more aware, because the costs are so high. I mean, you can't be running a business and have 50% returns and not realize that it's a problem. So, I mean, the companies are becoming more aware. It's just that they don't really know what to do. And when you think about how much it costs to implement new computer systems, it costs so much, and companies are very conflicted as to where to put their money. So it's very difficult for them to know whether to invest a lot of money into the returns process. But as things get worse and worse, as they are, the return rates are increasing. It is becoming more obvious that companies do need to do something about it, but many companies just don't have the wherewithal to do that. And maybe that's where Julia's company is a good idea, to actually bring together different companies and see and share the data, basically, to see what can actually happen.
Thank you, Sharon. And how about you, Petter?
Yeah, I totally agree with Sharon that awareness is one of the key things, and I also think that the industry is waking up now, and they are totally aware of the problem. And I think we need to address the problem and the reason for the problem, and not just fix the symptoms. And the data sharing is key. From a technical point of view, this is not so complicated to solve. What's complicated is to get the industry to actually start sharing data, collaborate to solve this major problem.
Thank you, Peter. How about that sharing the data? What do you think, Jan?
That's one of the key issues to create transparency.
Yeah.
And it's hard because it's business sensitive data in some cases, and it's I think konkurrensmyndigheter, competition
I don't know what
authorities.
That is. Can anyone help in here?
Might have issues about collaborating in some ways, but I think that transparency and customer awareness in combination, they would create new business models. They will force new business models to surface. Yeah. And I'm really happy to hear there are so many people in different angles addressing this.
Yeah. Now, what about you, Julia?
Well, I can only agree with the others that I think the awareness part, and also as Lynn are working on, how do we change our behaviors, our consumption. And I think it's such a great initiative that you have taken, Lynn, of how do we educate and change from an early age in the patterns. That I think is super.
Yeah.
So,
thank you. No, but I agree about the awareness, but also I think that crossover industry collaborations, being curious and bold and daring, I think is, like crossover industry collaborations, I think to explore that more and just see what happens when fashion meets tech. Etc. Yeah.
Thank you all. This has been so interesting. I wish we would have more time because I think that we could talk about this for a very, very long time. And I hope that this conversation will be an ongoing conversation between us and with others, to include others into this conversation. I'm humbled and I'm grateful, and I'm very happy that you would all join us. Thank you for joining online. Thank you for coming here to the studio. And yes, thank you all.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So.